on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot. Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
We're the Packers.
Oh yeah, they get packed, baby.
And we are fresh from vacation.
Oh man, I feel refreshed.
Do you?
Yeah, don't you?
Yeah, I do. We actually spent the week in New Orleans.
Man, it was so much fun.
And popped off in Biloxi.
It's so beautiful in Biloxi.
The beach is fantastic there.
It is.
Well, your first time in the Big Easy, Dylan, what were your thoughts?
Well, I must say I enjoyed the city. It's, you know me, I'm an infrastructure big equipment guy, so I thought the city...
he's a big equipment guy, you guys.
Yeah, I like to look at big equipment.
I bet, yeah.
Wait.
It's not surprising at all.
Yeah, I'm really comfortable
Who doesn't like to look at big equipment?
with big machinery. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So the urban planning there, I think, was well thought out. It's an older city, obviously, and it's pretty cool, easy to get around. So lots of cool stuff to see. You know, you're surrounded by the wetlands and such.
Now, isn't this hilarious? So we're talking to Dylan about his impression of the city, and he's over here talking about big machinery and city planning, right? He's not talking about, like, the beautiful architecture or the good food. This is what I deal with, you guys.
What, do you think something's wrong with me?
Dylan is like the Clark Griswold of this family.
Oh, I must say, in those pictures, I look so extra fat, so that's great. That was good angles. Our kids take the best pictures.
Our kids take shit pictures. I mean, I know I'm fat, but you would think they could at least... give me a decent angle to try to like remove the double chin, but I feel like they intentionally go out of their way to make us look terrible in pictures.
Oh my God, and they take a picture of themselves and it is like, looks like it was done in a studio and like they had an entire team
they
preparing.
All face tune it and shit.
Everything's perfect, but like they want, they only want to take 10 seconds to do our picture, and if the camera if filming adds 10 pounds, our kids' pictures add like 40 pounds on me.
So true.
Thanks, kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love New Orleans. I thought the food was incredible and very interesting. The history, mixed into the city.
We took your daughter with us. She's about to be 14.
Well, she's all grown up.
Got a birthday coming up.
Yup.
So it was kind of a nice little birthday kind of getaway for her as well. And she brought along her cousin. And I think they had a lot of fun together. I
will say there's not a whole lot, for the young ones to do in New Orleans. Maybe I'm not in the know.
I don't feel like it's a family town. I mean, I feel like it's definitely a town for couples and maybe a romantic adventure or a group of friends, bachelor party bridesmaids, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because, the eating and the drinking and such and just, carrying on, being adults, I think is...
Thanks, kids, for ruining our trip.
Oh, my God. It was really hot.
Yeah, it was we didn't pick a great time of year to go.
No, but we loved it, and we'll go back to New Orleans. So anyone down there, down that way, you live in a pretty incredible area.
Yeah, I love it. I would move there.
Yeah, I'd move there.
You would? Can we move there?
I'll just live in that Airbnb.
Can we move there? Please,
I already got my bags packed.
Daddy, please.
I got a job at the big equipment store.
Oh, God.
They want me to be a model. I'm not sure what they mean by that.
I thought they were going to hire you at the small equipment operating
store. I've already
we're looking for a man who can operate small equipment.
No, we've already cost cutting, how it is corporate.
Right. Well,
cutthroat corporate world. We've already absorbed the small equipment store into the big equipment store.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we popped off in Biloxi there, which all this ties into the second part of the State Line Dixie Mafia story you're telling, right?
Well, that's what was so cool about vacationing in New Orleans and then stopping off in Biloxi, driving through like some of the Gulf Coast area and actually seeing these places where the story occurs.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
So episode 98 left us with the downfall of the State Line Mafia, which operated out of Tennessee and Mississippi. We discussed Sheriff Buford Pusser's role in bringing down the organization and all of the wacky events that surrounded his legend.
The one-man army there, Mr. Pusser.
Here we are, episode 99, And our second part of this story, we're going to be focusing on Deep South outlaws and a homegrown crime cartel that operated along the bayous, bays, and swamps of the Gulf Coast area. They cropped up like kudzu and were equally as hard to get rid of.
Oh, wow. I like that.
A group of good old boys with a ruthless spirit who became cold-blooded killers willing to do anything to make a dime. Now, in their heyday, the Dixie Mafia had their thumb in every pie, whether it was illegal gaming, drug trafficking, money laundering, blackmail, bribery, or carrying out contract killings. They were led by criminal mastermind Kirksey Nix Jr., and the mafia lifestyle became something out of a Hollywood movie. The liquor flowed freely, there were drugs, women everywhere, they did their business in flashy casinos and smoky bars. The party never stopped, and few were willing to cross them, especially go as far as testifying.
Well, yeah, they were tied to so much violence over a long span of time. And it's one thing you didn't do was even threaten to testify against these guys.
Anyone willing to rat them out would be killed. There was no doubt about it. This criminal syndicate had friends in high places, including members of law enforcement and powerful attorneys, maybe even a few politicians in their pocket. Now, I should also note that Biloxi, Mississippi, there was a period of time for maybe about 10 years or so, a decade in the 1940s, where gambling wasn't illegal per se, as long as it operated inside a quote-unquote casino.
So it wasn't illegal, but they had certain rules they had to follow?
Yeah, there were some certain stipulations about it being inside a casino, which of course is not like the casinos we think of today. The big elaborate casinos.
No, I don't think it's
These
the
were
one.
more like little, kind of hole-in-the-wall beer joints. And there was like a certain section of town where it was designated like, if you're doing the illegal gaming and you've got these games and such running in this like particular area, we won't bother you kind of thing. But by the 1950s, this was shut down completely, and that sparked the creation of the Dixie Mafia, as the people had a taste of what kinds of money gaming could bring in. There were 300 vice dens in Biloxi by the 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, it's no matter what it is. If it's drugs, prostitution, what the vice is. If there's a market and there's all these millions or even billions of dollars to be, a profit to be made, someone's always going to try to provide that service.
And vice, of course, welcomes its cousin crime, public corruption, all of that.
That's why you should just legalize everything.
Much like the story of Buford Pusser and the State Line Mafia, there are going to be a lot of players, and I'm going to try my best to paint you a picture of the organization. Bear with me. Again, there's going to be a lot of names, a lot of information. We may take a break from one story to get into another. I'll try to circle back around how it's all relevant. But there's so much information, Dylan.
Yeah, and I think just this cast of characters, you asked me, you was like, was that too much in the first episode? And it was a lot of information, but I think if you know these people's histories and their backstories, and you kind of see how they all, come together in this big ball of just
shitbirds,
a big ball of shit. And but I think it really helps to understand how they interact in the end of the story, if you know where they start at. So I think you did a great job. Let's do it.
The Dixie Mafia was unlike other mobsters. There were no familial ties or chain of command. Now, the closest to a leader or maybe even a godfather type of figure is a man named Mike Gillich Jr. Now, around the coast, he's nicknamed Coast Mike or Mr. Mike. And Gillich was of Croatian descent, and he grew up very poor in a huge, super large family, so he understood what it meant to grow up with nothing and struggle. And I'm sure this created that sense in him that he needed to grow up and make money and have money, and he didn't want to be poor again.
Yeah, I think especially these people that come from maybe another culture, or a country you might consider a second or third world or whatever. But yeah, sometimes these immigrants I wish I could be as driven as they are, because they will just, work 4 jobs, save every dime, and just try really hard to have plenty of money and be comfortable.
Gillich was considered the most trusted member of the organization, so he kind of became like the protector or patrons of others. People trusted him so much they would bring him their money and say, hey, will you hold on to this for me? And he would take care of it for them.
Yeah, what's very interesting about this group is it's kind of decentralized. There is no pecking order per se, but it seems that Gillich was the guy who everyone trusted with money to, the secrets, and it's like if someone didn't like so and so, but they do have to deal with them to make money, they would oftentimes funnel it through Gillich, or those two parties would come communicate literally through Gillich, and he kind of knew all the dirt.
Yeah, totally. That's a great way to describe him, Dylan, because you're right. He was kind of like a mediator. He would bring these different people together for jobs. He would kind of handpick if someone came to him and said, hey, here's a job that I want to do. We're going to make all this money, but I need a crew. Gillich would help pull like the people he trusted the most or who he felt would be the most reliable members to participate in this particular crime.
Now, could you imagine partaking in this kind of operation, these kinds of operations, like literally getting a crew together to go rob a place or, do some kind of big scam?
Well, here I am podcasting, and I truly miss my life's calling, Dylan.
Oh my God, are you the godmother?
I would have been a great assassin.
Yeah, you could kill people.
I would. I totally feel like if I had ever been introduced to like a criminal organization like this, I would have excelled.
Yeah,
I might be dead right now, but I feel like I would do really well with this.
I think you would come up through the ranks very quickly.
Very organized, detail-oriented.
Yeah, and I would...
sociopath.
Oh, yeah, and you wouldn't feel bad about taking someone down to the river, tying them up, and letting the rats eat them?
No.
Okay, the ice woman.
Yeah, pretty much. So I really feel like, man, I missed an opportunity here. If only I'd been born like 70 years earlier. Now, in the late 1960s, Gillich began organizing this loose group of traveling criminals who were into, as I mentioned, moonshine, gambling, drugs, dogfighting, prostitution, extortion, arms trafficking, murder, just about any scam they could come up with that would earn money. Now, as you mentioned, Dylan, there was no real person in charge. The leadership kind of switched to whomever had the most money or was leading the operation, or whoever had the best idea to make the most money.
Yeah, I can see pros and cons to this kind of setup, People's, we're just out to make the most money we can at any point. So if someone has the good idea or the great, next robbery or scam, he kind of takes the lead and everybody kind of listens to him. So in a way, I could see that benefiting a group like this. But at the same time, you need that fear and structured organization to keep all these alpha male, just maniac personalities kind of in line.
The only rule that the 100 or so members lived by was very simple. Thou shalt not snitch to cops.
Or where snitches end up?
In ditches with stitches?
Well, in witness protection, too.
Yeah, there's that. Mike Gillich Jr. and his lounges, the Golden Nugget and Dream Room, were fixtures on Biloxi's tourist strip for decades. He used to stand in front of his beachfront building in the afternoons and watch traffic pass, or he'd be found sipping coffee with friends across the street at the Krispy Kreme Donuts.
So he's just like a neighborhood fixture, kind of, always around.
He also maintained an extensive network of criminal contacts in the Dixie Mafia. And though he would deny having anything to do with the murders they left in their wake, he definitely was in the mix. Now, honestly, just looking at pictures of this guy, he reminds me of a grandfather.
Yeah, he looks very, very normal.
His hair, his style of dress. He reminds me of my papaw and my great uncles. Just the way he looks and dresses. Just like your typical, older man. And he looks like the little old men who used to hang out at my papaw's barbershop. He doesn't look like a criminal. And that was the thing about these guys. They were not what you would call wise guys, per se.
No, I don't think they were making plenty of money, but they're not, flashing it around. They're not going around with, two young hot girls on their arms and all this stuff. They're kind of, I'm sure, young people nowadays will see an old person.
They weren't decked out in fancy suits. When you think of mafia and you watch the Goodfellas movie, right? They're decked out, dressed to the nines, gold watches, rings, flashing cash. And these guys weren't like that. They were Southern boys. They were charming. They would say hello and smile, polite, friendly, but then cut your throat.
Well, yeah, some young kid would see this old man and be like, oh, look at that old man, little weak old man or whatever, and this guy could have you murdered. in like 10 minutes.
And it wasn't like they went around with a lot of muscle, or they looked like a bunch of, muscled out thugs who were just kind of terrorizing the area or terrorizing like regular folks. And that's probably another reason why they were allowed to operate for so long.
Well, yeah, when you get in an area and you have, paying off some police members, you're paying off local politicians. I mean, you just have free reign, really, to do what you want. Because unless something huge happens and it gets up to the federal level and outside the area, no one's there to stop you from doing these things.
And in the community, I mean, people were aware of what they were doing, but for the most part, they seemed to just leave normal people alone.
Well, if you keep the violence off the streets, or if someone does pay a price, it's one of your own members.
Well, that's exactly kind of how it went down.
They're not doing the, when the mafia wars in New York and stuff started. I mean, the violence, the bombs, and things, and the Cleveland mob fell apart in Cleveland. Danny Green's story, which is a very good story. The violence was out there in the public. I mean, if you're coming out of your house and a fucking neighbor's car blows up, I mean, that's scary. Or dead people everywhere. All these things start scaring the public. But if you keep all that behind closed doors and people just turn up in the swamp and things like that, people are write it off, because at the end of the day, these are your customers. These people, because people like the vice and the drugs and the, to a degree. So these are your customers, and you don't want to scare them off.
Well, Gillich took a particular liking to a young man named Kirksey Nix Jr. Now, let's talk a little bit about Kirksey. We'll call him Nix mostly throughout the story. He was the son of a prominent judge in Oklahoma, but that didn't stop his life of crime. It probably encouraged it, if you think about it.
Well, yeah, because if he does if he has that attitude to get in these, trouble and things, his father has the power to get him out of trouble, for real.
Yeah, and I think a lot of kids that grow up with strict parents or parents in a position of authority, I think of like ministers' kids. Your dad's a cop, your dad's a judge. For whatever reason, kids seem to want to rebel against that structure and that restriction.
Well, yeah, I think that's true.
Wild out a little bit, and so I think that also was Nix's attitude. Now, he had been on law enforcement radar for about a decade, but none of the charges would stick. So after he ambushed Sheriff Pusser on New Hope Road, everyone involved, of course, felt the wrath of this disfigured lawman. But somehow Nix would escape, but that's not going to last for too long. Now, the ambush and killing of Pauline Pusser wasn't Kirksey's first slaying. His group of rogues were accused of several home invasions and murders across 4 different states. Now, it seemed as if nothing could stop this group of murderous thieves. A series of events would lead to Nix's downfall, and it would start shortly after the death of Pauline Pusser. Now, the year before the ambush on Pusser, Junior was arrested on felony counts. I called him Junior there, but I'm talking about Nix. He was arrested on felony counts of burglary and grand larceny. December 29th, 1965, Nix and his gang broke into a boys' summer camp near Mount Ida, Arkansas. They stole 10 rifles, a movie projector, and sporting equipment, according to the Daily Oklahoman's article, which was published on January 22nd of 1966. He was in trouble in April of 1966 for passing bad checks, and then again in August for using illegal license plates.
So he's just running wild.
After paying fines, Nix kicks off a robbery spree that would span several states, and some of these cases would end up in murder. Then the ambush of Sheriff Pusser happened on August 12th, 1967, and that kind of had Nix back on the scene, in the forefront of, law enforcement, the media, bringing his name back into to everything. Now, Buford Pusser accused Nix and a few others as the shooters who attacked him on that hot August day, but nothing really ever came of that. Pusser's like, these are the people who killed me, but again, remember there were no charges brought. They were never arrested for this.
Well, yeah, I found that interesting that, they didn't take a notable lawman's word for, as far as who he thought he saw and things like that.
The next big thing that Nix did after shooting Pusser and his wife allegedly was on March 19th, 1968, a newspaper reported that Nix pled guilty to some minor charges, including reckless driving and the unlawful use of a radio. Apparently, he had been monitoring police radio frequencies, and, that's pretty genius if you don't get caught, right?
Well, yeah, that's like everybody's granny. I heard your name come across the scanner last night, and I'm just seeing if you was okay. Don't you love when that happens? But yeah, I mean, this is early on the technological age. That's a pretty ingenious thing to do. You can hear them because everything was very simple as far as communication. You can hear them call out a car or going to a location, so give you a head up where the cops are coming to.
Then on April 30th of 1968, Nix is jailed after his gang failed to rob the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in Atlanta, Georgia. Nix, along with 4 men and 1 woman, attempted to rob the place, but a guard named Robert P. Fouch interrupted them, and he was shot, but he wasn't killed in this robbery. Then in May of 1968, it was actually May 21st, Nix's daddy, who was Judge Kirksey Nix, drove a dark-colored 1967 Cadillac to work and parked it in front of the state capitol building. About an hour later, the car exploded, sending shrapnel across the parking lot.
Oh, my God.
No one was injured in the bombing, and authorities didn't believe the explosion was caused by a bomb and said there were actually several oxygen tanks in the trunk of the car that caused the explosion.
Oh, my God.
However, rumors swirled, as you can imagine, that Nix or perhaps some of his enemies might have made an attempt on his father's life. Crazy. Some also speculate that this car was stolen, that it had been used in the assassination of Pauline Pusser, then blown up because it was evidence. And I found more details on this theory, which have law enforcement, such as Sheriff Hobbs, and we're going to talk more about him later, involved in this conspiracy to blow up this car to cover up the crime of killing, Pusser's wife. But it's a lot to get into as far as there was a lot of information about the car being stolen from this particular person, title transfers, and a lot of stuff. But I'm not going to get into all that because we would be talking about that for some time.
Well, I would assume that his father was unwitting in this. He just grabbed a car that was at the house and drove it to work?
Perhaps. I'm not sure. Other people speculate that his father was in on blowing up this car because it was evidence.
Yeah, that's a pretty public way to do it. I guess you don't know exactly what happened, but, why else would you have oxygen tank? there are oxygen tanks in the trunk, and it's very strange, but his son is doing all this fairly significant crimes. These are big crimes, dangerous crimes, and I wonder what his father really thought about, his son's out there doing all these things. He had to know about it all.
I was curious about that, Dylan, but I didn't find a whole lot of information about whether Nix's family sort of enabled him or were in denial, as a lot of parents are. Like, my boy's a good boy.
Well, even if
if they were like, you're a shitbird, we don't want to fuck with you. I don't know.
Even if you're not complicit or actively involved in their things, sometimes you can enable these behaviors by just trying to do what you think's best for your child. Get them out of trouble, and all that stuff. So he could have done that at the very least.
During the 1969 Mardi Gras celebrations, a group of heavily armed men attacked some carnival workers near Lake Pontchartrain. 44-year-old carnival worker named Margie George was shot and killed during this raid. Now, many believe that Nix was responsible for leading this assault.
Well, they're just all over the place with these robberies, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's go. We're going to rob the carnival. Get all the stuffed octopuses you want. I don't need no damn tickets.
Freeze. Give me all your corn dogs and turkey legs.
Well, if you think about it, those stuffed animals and stuff along the little game row are very valuable because you can have $200 or $300 in those damn things by the time you win them.
Easter morning of 1979. This is when Nix really fucks up. He and his gang break into the home of a wealthy grocer named Frank Corso. And Frank Corso was a very well-respected, known businessman in New Orleans. Owned this grocery store. By all accounts, he was well-liked in the community, just a really good man. Now, Corso was awakened by his wife screaming. She heard the break-in. And I just have to ask, what is it with us women? We hear every noise at night while our husbands are dead asleep.
Yeah, that's true.
So if it weren't for us, these home invasions, you would just sleep through the whole thing.
And wake up and everything's gone, or, maybe you're dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So Corso grabs a pistol and he gets into a shootout with Nix in the hallway of his home. He manages to shoot Nix in the stomach, but he is then killed. Now, the gang manages to drag a wounded Nix out to the car. Now, Mrs. Corso grabs a gun and chases the men down the street, firing at them.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it's went awry. Whatever they were trying to do went south, and now Nix is injured, and they barely get him out of there.
Well, Nix believed that Corso, being this wealthy business owner, likely had a safe or had a lot of money at home, a lot of valuables.
Yeah, I think there was also some speculation that maybe they were sent there to kill Corso.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure in my little bit of research on this is that was a theory of cops that Corso, because I think to this day the grocery business, and back then these are all small, independent grocers. That's big money. I mean, you can make lots of money selling groceries. And there was some Corso had dispute with other local business people. They were wanting to do this, and he disagreed completely and didn't want to buy in. So there was a little speculation that maybe Nix and his crew was sent there to kill Corso.
Interesting. Well, as I said, Mrs. Corso, she grabs this gun. I like this woman. And she chases these men down the street, firing at them. Misses. She returns back home, and that's where her husband basically dies in her arms.
Yeah, I mean, she woke him up, and he fought to the end to protect his family. So I mean, that's very valiant effort there on Mr. Corso's part.
Kirksey Nix Jr. was hit square in the stomach. Now, I also read that he was hit in the chest, but that it somehow managed to, injure his stomach more so than the chest.
Okay, could have bounced off a breastbone or something.
Perhaps. But Nix manages to get himself to St. Paul's Hospital in Dallas, where he's treated for the gunshot wound. However, Dallas authorities show up soon after and arrest him. In 1972, Nix and his cohorts would be convicted of the murder of Corso, and he would receive life in prison.
So they finally got Nix and his crew off the damn streets.
Yes, but this will not be the last we hear about Kirksey Nix Jr. He's going to continue running the show from a cell in Louisiana's famous Angola prison.
Oh, that's like a work farm prison. They don't play around in Angola, I think.
Angola has a reputation for being probably one of the, if not the most, brutal prisons. It's up there with, Rikers Island.
Right.
Alcatraz.
Yeah, they don't play around, and some pretty bad people there.
Now, as I mentioned previously, a man named Sheriff Leroy Hobbs. Okay, now he, along with other officers, were on the Dixie Mafia's payroll and allowed the criminal operations to take place. They would help secure shipments of moonshine. They would cover up murders, turn a blind eye to the illegal gaming, prostitution, robberies.
Yeah, but see, when someone in that position starts taking bribes and is on the take, I think that's what goes way beyond, just the bribery or things like that. They are allowing these organizations to run amok, to not be worried about the law at all. And a lot of times they'll get, a lot more violence and things happens in the community because of them turning their blind eye. So I think there should be some special charge for that. I don't know what it'd be, but.
Hobbs came to power as sheriff in 1971, running as an independent, which was very unusual at that time. You had the Democrats, the Republicans, and that was it. So for him to run as an independent was kind of whoa, they got attention. He served until 1983 before going to prison on federal racketeering and drug-related charges. He served 11 years, 6 months, and of a 20-year sentence. And that was following a federal sting operation that would happen later, as I mentioned, in the 80s. Now, once he was released, he attempted to run for sheriff again as late as 2007.
What the hell?
But he died in 2008, and I found an interview that he did with a local newspaper, and this was in 2007 when he was running for sheriff, and he was quoted as saying, "I'm in it for the long haul."
Damn, he don't give a damn, does he?
Don't give a damn. Felon running as sheriff. One such friend of the Dixie Mafia was a police officer from Gulfport named Deputy Dan Anderson. His daughter is Philip Cook, and she will come into play later because she's been very vocal about the Dixie Mafia, basically. So her father, this officer Dan, was really involved with the mafia, probably more than he should have been, and she doesn't make any bones about that. I mean, she's like, hey, my dad was a good man at heart, but he had a lot of addictions, and gambling was one of them, and yeah, he got tied up with these people. Now, of the friends in law enforcement, he would often be seen playing cards at the Grand Casino in Gulfport. He would rub elbows with some of the most feared gangsters in the area. And Anderson had a son named Ronald who was introduced to the seedy underbelly of, Mississippi by his dad. Brings in his young son. He starts hanging around, meeting these people, like seeing, what's going on. Now, after he had spent most of his life in Pensacola, Ronnie, as he was known, moved to Gulfport with his father because his mother was remarrying. And it was through his father's ex-wife, Rose, that Ronnie met a guy named Jeffrey Bass, who was an alleged member of the Dixie Mafia. Rose was Jeffrey's aunt, and a rumor had it that she had some questionable ties as well to the Dixie Mafia. So here Dan is, like, marrying into this family. They've got the ties. His son knows these people. He's introduced to this other dude who becomes his roommate. And he spends a few years in Gulfport. And by the time he's 17, he moves in, as I said, with Jeffrey Bass. And they're like in a rooming house sort of situation together. Now, on this one particular day, Dan Anderson went to see his son. And he brought along with him some new shoes and a little money to give his kid. And when he left, Ronnie was ironing a shirt and packing up some things because he was going to go stay with his sister Phyllis. Because, again, she was really worried. I mean, this is her 17-year-old brother. He's been living in Gulfport for a little bit. He's been surrounded by these criminal types.
Well, yeah, I mean...
She just knows that there's, like, a better way.
Well, you keep meeting, person after person that has these, bad vibes or just seems like a bit of a character and kind of scary. Yeah, I mean, it's natural to be worried about your family member being near them.
And just, hey, come stay with me for a little while. Let's get you out of this and get you away from some of these people you're associating with in Gulfport. So he was like, okay, he was going to give it a shot. So Deputy Anderson wasn't home for more than an hour when an officer arrived at his door with news that Ronnie had been shot.
Oh, God.
Dan Anderson arrived at the hospital, and his ex-wife, Rose, was waiting there to meet him, and she told him that Ronnie was dead. Now, Ronnie's death was ruled a suicide, despite overwhelming evidence that this was not the case. The two known witnesses, Jeffrey Bass, the roommate, and a girlfriend, had conflicting accounts. Now, Jeffrey would claim that Ronnie had been playing with a .410 shotgun, and that it accidentally went off, shooting himself in the head. Ronnie's girlfriend, a woman named Kathy, claimed that they had been arguing. Ronnie grabbed the gun and intentionally shot himself. But neither party called for an ambulance after the incident.
That's not sounding very good at all.
Jeffrey instead called his Aunt Rose Anderson, who worked as a registered nurse. She helped Jeffrey bathe Ronnie and change his clothes.
Oh, God, that's so inappropriate.
The shirt Ronnie was wearing at the time of his death mysteriously went missing. Also missing was the gun itself.
Well, I mean, it's obvious that local authorities are, kind of turning a blind eye of sorts to this because, I mean, everything about that's wrong as far as a crime scene goes and a proper investigation.
The Gulfport Sheriff's Department insisted that Ronnie Anderson killed himself and disposed of the weapon after the fact, which we all know makes literally no sense.
Well, it must have been sawed off or something because it seems to be pretty hard to shoot yourself in the, especially just grabbing a weapon and shooting yourself in the head with a shotgun.
Well, I've just never known anybody to shoot themselves in the head and then after they're dead, pick up the gun and hide it.
Yeah, that's or shoot themselves twice in the head. Those things like that make you wonder who the hell really killed him.
And as I mentioned, Phyllis, Ronnie's sister, has been a vocal opponent of this investigation. She has, for years, demanded justice, that someone should be arrested for murdering her brother, refuses to believe it's a suicide, and it sounds like she has good authority to make those claims. But guess who was in charge of this investigation? Sheriff Leroy Hobbs. He was overseeing the case at the time.
Oh, the pure as the driven snow Hobbs?
Yes.
Okay, the virtuous Hobbs.
And Dan Anderson will play a role later in our story, so don't forget his name when we get into talking about the Sherrys.
Deputy Dan Anderson?
Deputy Dan is going to be involved in what happens to the Sherrys later.
Okay.
As I stated earlier, so Kirksey Kirksey Nix Jr., he's going to continue running this shit show from behind bars. Now, Nix truly believed if he raised enough money that he could buy his way out of prison.
Well, I mean, he's been around people being paid off, officials. He may have actually had a way of doing that if he got enough money up.
One of his many illegal activities behind bars included a lonely heart scam.
Now, this is, I mean, I don't even know who thinks this up. And this is back in the 60s, going into the 70s now?
Well, no, he started this lonely heart scam from prison, which would have been in the 70s.
Oh, so we're in the 70s now.
But he's been running the scam for a while. It's in the 70s, going into the 80s. He's making all sorts of money with this scam. And this scam is where our story takes another dark turn. So here's how the scam worked. Inmates paid guards to use prison telephones. They placed bogus ads in homosexual publications. I read somewhere like The Advocate, which is still around, was one of those publications. And they would claim they were gay and looking for a new partner to move in with. The men who replied would send their letters to a return post office that, they got like some additional photos, correspondence, like racy pictures. So they would send it to this P.O. box. But there was a catch. The scammers told their victims a variety of lies about why they needed money before they could move in with them.
So I'm just amazed. I know this. I could see some people responding to this. I'm just amazed how many people responded to these ads and sent them money, because the money quickly climbed into hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, I thought about that, but think about today in our modern times. I've heard stories of men and women falling victim to like catfishing schemes online. They meet this person online. They fall in love with this person through the internet, and they start sending this person money.
Well, I guess it's no different.
Scammed. I mean, it's really no different than those types of scams that we hear about nowadays.
Well, and I guess there were limited ways for people to communicate with who they felt were like-minded individuals. So I guess so.
Now, a lot of money was flowing in. There were hundreds of victims. There were men from all walks of life, professors, mail carriers, politicians that fell victim to the scam. There was even a guy in Kansas who mortgaged his house and sent $30,000 to the scammers over a period of months.
That's crazy.
To add insult to injury, some of the inmates writing letters eventually confessed the scam to their victims and then extorted even more money by threatening to out the men if their demands were not met.
I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the blackmail option.
The scam brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars, money they entrusted to their lawyer, Pete Hallett. But Hallett would later claim, he's going to later be the mayor of Biloxi, right? He spends the money. So when it came time to hand it over to the Dixie Mafia, Hallett said the cash had been taken by his former law partner, a man named Vincent Sherry.
See, Hallett is, in my opinion, one of the biggest pieces of shit in this story, just because of what you're about to describe right now.
Now, Vincent Sherry was a state circuit court judge. So the Dixie Mafia ordered a hit on Sherry. But let's talk a little bit about the Sherrys. Vincent and Margaret Sherry were well known in Biloxi. They were considered pillars of the community. Both were active members who were, friendly. People spoke highly of them around town. They were just good people, generous, kind, compassionate. And some people said that Vincent Sherry was like really the kind of guy that if you came up to him and you were like, I'm hungry, he would hand you $10.
Well, yeah, they were active in the community. They cared about, even if you didn't agree with what they thought, the community should be or do, they cared about their community and they tried to affect change. They didn't just complain about it.
Vincent was like a centrist Democrat, and he'd been a criminal attorney. And he actually had some clients who were members of the Dixie Mafia. And then he was appointed to the state circuit court to be a judge. And his wife, Margaret, was a staunch Republican who had been a former city councilwoman. She had her sights set on becoming mayor of Biloxi. She had this crusade that she was going to clean up the town from the gaming, the prostitution, the criminal elements, and of course the corruption that had been there.
Yeah, she had a specific view of what she thought Biloxi should be, kind of go back to what it was before all the gaming and strip clubs and things like that. And she she didn't hide that fact. She was very vocal about it.
Now, to some, the Sherrys might have been one of those, like, weird opposite attracts couples.
Well, yeah, house divided.
Because they definitely had, opposing political beliefs and didn't always see eye to eye on things. And Vincent had defended some of the very people that Margaret was targeting with her crime cleanup.
Well, I could see that causing a little bit of, interesting, at the very least, interesting conversation amongst the two.
But by all accounts, they were a happily married couple, and they seemed to have a real, mutual respect for each other, even their differences, and found a way to make it work.
Oh, it's like me and you.
We're not really that different, are we?
No, we're not.
I mean, I feel like...
Oh, it's not like me and you.
At the core of things, we are very much the same.
No, we align in religious beliefs, or the lack thereof, and political beliefs for the most part. Yeah. I was just saying something. That's what I do.
I mean, we're different in the fact that, you just leave your wet towels laying around everywhere.
Oh my God! Don't get her started on these alleged wet towels.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's no evidence.
But both Vincent and Margaret, they were big personalities. Both were considered natural leaders, and they were people who had a lot of ambition.
Yeah, they seem to have some clout there in the community. I mean, he has a prominent judge position. She has her eyes on being mayor, and she's doing all the right things to get there.
Now, legal gaming didn't officially come to Biloxi until the 1990s. However, it was well known that the establishments, I'll get that out, all along the Strip were full of gaming and prostitution. Margaret Sherry opposed the strip clubs where prostitution was occurring. Biloxi was a summer resort area. It was close to New Orleans and, of course, situated on the beautiful Gulf of Mexico. There's white sandy beaches, warm water, and Margaret wanted the destination to be more family-friendly and draw in more tourism dollars.
Yeah, and it's a bunch of casinos there.
So her vision for the future of Biloxi was much different than what it was at the time. I mean, it was kind of known as a poor man's Riviera, but in the 80s, they started getting more visitors from, up north. People who might vacation in Florida typically were starting to come to Biloxi because it was not as crowded, maybe a bit more affordable, but they were still getting the same white sandy beaches, warm waters.
Yeah, it's beautiful there, that's for sure.
And after the Mafia had dug in, I mean, it was a seedy place. This was not a really classy kind of area at the time. And Margaret wanted it to be more of that. Maybe she envisioned it becoming more like a Charleston.
Or just more family friendly and all these things, which, all this generates a large amounts of revenue when you get the infrastructure and the right businesses and things to draw. Because I'll tell you, one of the people who spend the most money are young families with kids.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Every time you turn around, it's freaking $100, $200. You can really drop a lot of money on vacation with a family.
In 1983, the FBI began investigating Biloxi, especially the law enforcement there, so authorities became very aware of the crime and corruption. Margaret Sherry welcomed this, and there were a few non-corrupt officers who also assisted the FBI in their investigation.
Yeah, the corruption had been there for so long, it just had permeated throughout the entire, law enforcement, government officials, city officials. So, yeah, once it takes someone outside the area to really do anything about it.
The Sherry family settled in Biloxi in 1971. Vince had been in the Air Force, and he spent 7 years as an intelligence officer, then as a judge advocate for 13 years. He retired as an Air Force colonel and was ready to start another career, basically. He grew up in Kentucky. He attended 4 colleges. The guy had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, and a law degree. So he was a very well-educated man. Some people say he was brilliant.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a lot of hard work.
He was also licensed to practice law in 3 states, Virginia, Kentucky, and Mississippi, as well as in some federal courts, like the Patent Office Court, and a couple others. I didn't write them all down. He was also a college professor when they first moved to Biloxi for about 8 years. He spoke 5 languages.
My God.
Right. So this is a very impressive man. In 1981, he began practicing law in Biloxi, and that's when he first became associated with the Dixie Mafia. His partner, a man named Pete Hallett, as we mentioned before, had begun defending Nix in the 1970s. Sherry and Hallett had a very successful practice together, and they made a lot of money. Sherry was considered a very fair judge, like once he got appointed to the circuit court. And though he was friends with Hallett and some of these other attorneys, and he had ties to this, Dixie Mafia, was kind of known to these people, he was not known for making any sort of like deals or offering any kind of favoritism to these people.
So he had his time in the criminal law defending people, and so he took it to the bench, that fair-mindedness and everybody gets a fair shake kind of thing.
Yeah, he was really fair. He had like I said, he was a brilliant man, and he just had a very analytical mind. He didn't react with emotion. He reacted with the letter of the law. He was a stickler for this is what it says. This is what we're going to do. And he was actually liked by defendants.
Well, it sounds like that you could get a fair hearing or trial in front of him.
Well, and one thing I read said that defendants liked him. They would even send him letters and Christmas cards and such from prison.
Okay.
But it was because Sherry took the time to explain to them, like, this is what you did. This is why I'm sentencing you this way. And they thought he was just a really fair man. And they'd be like, okay, you're right. I did wrong. Okay.
Well, damn, that's pretty interesting.
Now, Margaret was born in Louisiana, but she grew up in Kentucky. She was a school teacher for a while, and she met her husband when they were both attending Western Kentucky University before Vince joined the Air Force. So they were together the whole time he was in the military. And from 1981 to 1985, she served as the city councilwoman. And then in 1986, she ran as a Republican mayoral candidate against the incumbent who was a Democrat. People would describe her as a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I think if you've made her mad or doing things she doesn't like, she's not going to be afraid to tell you and tell everybody that will listen.
Exactly. She lost to Gerald Blessey, a man who was kind of her enemy, and it was no secret that Margaret despised Blessey. He was not only her political rival, but she just didn't like him in general. He was a liberal Democrat who considered himself a progressive reformer, and he was very popular among poor black voters in town, and they actually helped to reelect him. In the 1980s, the economy was not so great in Biloxi. There was a slump in tourism. Some of this could have been because of some of the seedy mafia-type dealings. And Blessey's plan was to revamp the tourism area with new hotels, and he wanted like this French-style marketplace. Conservatives didn't want to drive out the old hotel owners, and they just wanted to see tax dollars go more to supporting locals, like paving the roads, infrastructure, that kind of thing, which is important.
So they're old school Republicans. They're small local government. Just do what you're supposed to, work on infrastructure, things like that, and don't totally change the scenery or the entire look of the town.
Which makes sense. I mean, we live in a tourist area, and we can see both sides of this. I mean, for one, you do kind of want the place to be appealing, attractive, more modern, but at the same time, you don't want to invest and spend all of your money into creating that when you don't have the infrastructure to support it.
No, because you quickly run into problems if you do that. And you want your place to, kind of retain its charm and things like that. And you come and gut everything. Well, you need growth, but it's the type of growth that's always the issue.
We're looking at you, Asheville.
Oh, my God.
Now, his plan, Blessey's plan, was going to add about 1,400 new jobs. So the election was really important to a lot of people in town. Margaret lost, but she planned to run again in 1988, and she was hell-bent on showing up at every meeting, making a stink, and opposing anything Blessey wanted to do. Very vocal, show up at meetings. She would demand that they have a referendum vote on certain things. And she also accused Blessey of being involved with the mafia, that he was paid off, and that he was misusing government funds. And the FBI even started looking into it, and Margaret was encouraging this investigation. And he was investigated, but nothing came of it. Blessey was outspoken against Margaret, calling her a racist and that she was a hypocrite. I mean, he's like, here your husband has this position where he's profited off of these criminals and this crime, and you've enjoyed this lavish lifestyle, being a wealthy lawyer's wife. And here you are trying to basically bite the hand that feeds you. So as you can see, it was a really nasty, contentious situation between these two.
Man, I bet that was some good city council meetings.
Probably very entertaining. On September 14th of 1987, Vincent Sherry and his wife Margaret were murdered in their home. Both shot in the head at point-blank range. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, it seems like an assassination, execution.
But nobody knew that the Sherrys, who were both 58 at the time, lay dead in their North Biloxi home. The circuit court judge's corpse was slumped in the den, and his wife's body was basically laying in the bedroom. Their law partner, Pete Hallett, discovers the bodies about 2 days later, which would have been September 16th.
See, that guy's so dirty. So, yeah, they didn't, no one knew that this crime had happened. And until like I think it happened over the weekend, and like Monday rolls around, and the judge is expected to be in court, so they miss him. And then at first everyone's just like flat tire, maybe he has car trouble. They're calling, no one get a hold of him or his wife, and so they reach out to Mr. Hallett because he is his partner, good friend, to go over there and see if and then or Hallett, but he yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes there, but it's just. It's so Weasley the way that Hallett lays out the next couple of things. Oh yeah,
Hallett goes to check on these guys. Yeah, he brings like a part or some employee,
an intern kind of guy, a young guy,
so that he has someone there to be like, oh.
Yeah, and he pulls up and he's like, I'm gonna go instead of, hey, this is my friend's house. It's probably been over 1 million times. Should be comfortable. Knocking on the door, looking around. I'm gonna go ask the neighbors if they've seen them. You go knock on the door and see if he'll come to it. And just all these things to have someone else discover the body and stuff. Thought he was being very clever.
And as I mentioned earlier in the story, the fella Dan Anderson, who was one of the deputies, he worked with Vincent Sherry in court, was, well known. They were well known to each other. And he was actually one of the deputies that came and discovered this and was just in shock because he was like friendly with Vincent Sherry and like had known him for years. And everybody was stunned. I mean, the entire city of Biloxi and the Gulf Coast, people were blown away by the story. Just couldn't imagine who would want to kill these two. Why did this happen? It terrified people. And with little evidence and seemingly no motive, I mean, there wasn't any kind of robbery, the house wasn't in disarray, law enforcement pretty quickly felt it was a professional hit.
Yeah, I think
and it was such a clean in and out. Nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything.
The only reason they were there were to kill these two.
Local authorities worked the case unsuccessfully for 2 years, and the federal investigation into the Sherry's murders lasted 8 years.
That's a long time for an investigation to carry on.
Now, initially, family members pointed the finger at Blessy as a suspect because, after all, he and Margaret had multiple public fights, and they were known to be enemies, but he was cleared.
Well, yeah, I mean, they obviously didn't agree and didn't, you could even say they hated each other, but I mean, I think that's a bit of a stretch to think that either of them would actually go to violence to settle their differences.
Let's pause for a moment, Dylan, and hear from our sponsors. The case would never have been solved if it hadn't been for the persistence of two individuals, the Sherry's oldest daughter, Lynn Sposito, and she lived in North Carolina at the time, and also Keith Bell, who was a special agent with the FBI, and he's since retired. Mike Gillich was convicted in 1991 of conspiring to kill Circuit Court Judge Vincent Sherry and his wife, Margaret Sherry. He, John Ransom, Kirksey Nix, and Nix's girlfriend, a woman named Sherry LaRoche Sharp, were convicted in 1991 on federal conspiracy charges.
So all that time investigating, they put the whole damn thing together, right?
Yep, they were able to figure out that Pete Hallett had taken this money, allegedly holding it for his client, but instead he was spending it like crazy, didn't have the money, blamed it on his partner, Vincent Sherry.
Gets them killed.
His
supposed friend. And I mean, what a greasy guy. I mean, what a piece of shit.
And from what I understand, Nix's girlfriend, Sherry, was a paralegal who had been working in the office for Pete Hallett and Vincent Sherry.
That's crazy.
In an interview, Sposito said that she didn't sleep through a single night until 10 years after her parents' death. And she finally got a good night's sleep when Hallett, who had been her parents' neighbor and friend, was finally convicted July of 1997 for his role in the murder conspiracy.
That's crazy. It took that long for justice to be served.
Yeah, their daughter Lynn, like I said, she really was on it. She was going to get somebody in jail for this. Like, she did not stop.
Yeah, and during all this time, all these years, I mean, I'm sure that the people involved thought they were going to get away with it. Hallett went on to be mayor.
Yeah, he went on to be mayor
and
of Biloxi.
A prominent figure. That even with this cloud, I mean, this suspicion hanging around him the whole time. So it's interesting about the citizens there of Biloxi, because when you have this widespread corruption and things like that, or you have someone who was, served as mayor and or sheriff and went to jail, and then, come out of jail and then have the balls or the guts to run again, they're doing it because they think they got a chance to win with the voters. So it's pretty interesting about, not saying anything bad about the citizens of Biloxi.
Well, no, I think it's easy to see that you get used to just about anything.
Yeah, I think that, that's what I meant.
Enough, and that perhaps this kind of corruption had been so ingrained in their community for
for decades.
long,
right,
that it just didn't even seem so out of the normal or out of the ordinary, because this is just what we're used to.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. That's sum up that's what I meant. Nothing against the people of Biloxi. We love it, and we're coming back.
In the final trial, which was in 1997, Pete Hallett was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Kirksey Nix, the mafia kingpin in Angola, who had ordered the hits, as well as the hitman who killed the Sherrys, all received life sentences. Sherry LaRoche Sharp was released June 13th, 2002 from a federal prison in Tallahassee, Florida, where she had only served 5 years for obstruction of justice.
Oh, wow.
John Elbert Ransom, he was the Dixie Mafia hitman who supplied the gun and killed the Sherrys, died in 2006. Mike Gillich died in 2012, and from what I can find, Nix is currently incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in El Reno. Hallett was released in 2013 after having served 15 years, 9 months, and 7 days in jail, and he was 70 years old.
Wow.
He then worked at a church in Hattiesburg, and he still maintains that he had absolutely no part in this murder plot.
I don't know if I believe that. I think he did have a part in it. Unless all these other people, which, I mean, they're crooks and criminals or whatever. But, I mean, and the parts he played, the way he played them after the murder and everything, it just seems obvious that he was involved to me.
So the old Dixie Mafia has died off. However, there is a new wave of criminals that have stepped up, including a gang known as the Simon City Royals. And they've kind of taken over selling drugs and such.
Oh.
But they're just what you would consider like a street gang.
Oh, okay. So they're just going after the one, just taking care of the one thing, keeping up the drugs and such.
Right. And a lot of them are recruited, like people who get in trouble, go to prison, come out, they're a member of this gang.
What was their name again?
The Simon Street Royals.
Wow.
I did happen to find a little documentary. It was about an hour and a half long, produced by the Discovery Channel, focusing on the street gang.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out.
And from what I gathered, they maybe originated somewhere in Chicago, and then it was like after Hurricane Katrina, they kind of trickled down and started doing business. But a few that I saw in the documentary, I mean, they just look like your typical low-level street thugs.
Oh, okay. Oh, they didn't
selling meth out of the back of a trailer and stuff. You know
so
what I mean?
They didn't have smoking jackets and like ascots and stuff and be like, hey,
no,
hello.
They just had like shitty, gang sign neck tattoos and like,
shit.
Can
I interest you in some $high cigars and drugs?
Like selling women meth and
okay.
And crack.
Right, but they still carrying that pretty sweet ass name with them though. Simon Street Royals.
Yeah, exactly.
The music starts playing, everybody's snapping. Next thing you know, there's a switchblade knife fight.
So I guess the crime will continue on, right?
It always will. That's because the only way to take care of this is to open the drug mart where you can go and buy all the drugs that you want legally. It's it, people. A certain percentage of people are going to do their drug of choice, be it caffeine, sugar, food, porn, or whatever that gets their rocks off until they die. So you sell it, you provide it to them, everything's safe and controlled, and you get rid of all the violence.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of, I'm a huge fan of The Wire, the HBO show.
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
hands down one of the best shows ever.
Amsterdam.
And Hamsterdam, was that season 3 or 4? They create this area of town, they call it Hamsterdam.
Yeah, and they tell the street kids and the
They
people
tell
selling.
everybody, if you want to sell drugs, you do it here in this zone. You use the drugs here in this zone. And it was like all the neighborhood crime started to go down.
Yeah.
Regular citizens were like, this is great.
Yeah, all the violence was basically off the street. It was contained in one area.
They were able to bring in like harm reduction folks in and do the needle exchange and stuff like that with these people. And
social workers kind of pulling these kids out of this element, getting them off the streets.
which of course it's just a TV show, but I mean, I think there's some truth behind that idea or that concept.
Well, it's a big idea, but obviously what we're doing is not working. So
Look at like a city like Amsterdam, where you can go use drugs, and they have a red light district,
right,
where prostitution is legal.
Well, it's statistically proven across the board that any community or culture that has legal sex work available, that things like some violence against women, rape, all these things, the statistics go down. Trafficking. Some of the kidnapping, all that stuff goes down because you take some person who's frustrated or, sexually deviant, and can't connect with a regular person, a regular woman or whatever, whoever they're looking for, but then they can go to a sex worker and, everything's above board. Yeah, I want you to pinch my nipples and stick this pointy thing in my ass.
You do?
Yeah, well, I'm saying this is theoretically.
I was going to say you probably shouldn't let our listeners know that.
Well, no, but you can go get that done by someone instead of having to force yourself upon a woman.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad I ended on that.
And it's a legal financial transaction where the sex worker would have to pay taxes on the money she earned, or that he or she earned.
Yes, and I was being silly there, but yes, she can. All the money is brought out of the black market into the public funds. It's taxed properly. There's, STD testing for everyone involved and things of that nature. Makes it safer.
Then we can pave them roads because we're going to have tax dollars to do it.
Yeah, we get the booty money fund.
Okay, so some resources for today's episode. I watched a 1999 episode of the FBI Files, which detailed the investigation of the Dixie Mafia. It talked about Pete Halleck, Kirksey Nix, the Lonely Hearts scam. I also found a program called Power, Privilege, and Justice, which was like a Dominic Dunn program. Watched some of that. I also combed through various newspaper articles of the time, quite a few out there, all along the Gulf Coast, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi newspapers. There's plenty of articles. There's also a book, Mississippi Mud by Edward Humes, and another book called Dream Room by Chet Nicholson. Hit subscribe, rate, and review us. Tell your friends about Mountain Murders.
Yeah, tell them I heard about this really cool podcast.
We're approaching our 100th episode, which is a huge milestone for us.
Yeah, it means a lot to us.
This is episode 99, so we're at the end here, Dylan. We're the final countdown to 100.
Oh, don't you dare say that, because I have to sing the song every time. Da 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 da.
I know.
Okay, it's that or the Danger Zone. Either one. I have to do it every time I hear it. But we really appreciate each and every single listener that ever takes the time to listen to one of our episodes, let alone multiple episodes. We appreciate our patrons, obviously. They help keep this thing going, and without them, we would not be able to afford to keep this thing going. So we appreciate that, and we just love all you guys and girls. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And as Dylan mentioned, Patreon. You can sign up to be a patron at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. And there you can access bonus material and, of course, support the show with a monthly contribution. I mean, you can join up for as low as $3 a month. Yes, you can, and that helps us pay for the calls, hosting platforms, things of that nature, upgrades of equipment. So thank you very much.
Also, we have a live show following the social distancing protocols that's coming at the end of October.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun.
It's going to be co-hosted by the Auditorium in Asheville, but it actually won't be at the Auditorium. They have a very special venue just for this show.
Oh my God, they're going to put bags on
like
our head?
VIP event. And we're going to have some more information and details coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled if you would like to see Mountain Murders live.